So this story in the gospel today actually starts after a pretty significant other story in the gospel, which is the death and the beheading of John the Baptist. So John the Baptist, so a refresher. John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin, who was the guy who went out and said, prepare the way for the Lord, prepared the way for Christ to come, and was also the one that baptized Jesus as well. So he was not really doing things that the powers that be really liked very much. He was kind of, agitating the crowds and trying to preach the gospel with Jesus and trying to do all these things that were a little subversive. So the powers that be did not like John the Baptist too much. Now, Herod, who was the ruler of all this, he kind of just let it go. He let it slide a little bit. He wasn't really too worried about it. But for some reason, Herod's wife wasn't a big fan of John the Baptist. And so they had this big, huge celebration. And it was an overabundance of food and, wine and all this stuff. Everybody was just eating so much. And it was all these, big, highfalutin, powerful people. And during this party, long story short, Herod's wife got John the Baptist beheaded and had his head on a plate. It's kind of weird, but that's what happened. And John the Baptist is now dead. And he was also the cousin of Jesus. So can you imagine having somebody tell you that your cousin has now been sacrificed because somebody's wife didn't like him very much? He'd be grieving, right? I mean, you would too. This is a time in Jesus' life where somebody close to him has now died and he wants to be alone. He wants to go away by himself so that he can think about, I'm sure, the death of his cousin. But Jesus isn't the type of person that gets to be alone very much. Mainly because what he does is reaches out to the poor and the hungry and the destitute, and they follow him where he is going because he has compassion for them, because he heals them. And of course, when he goes out into the boat to cross over to another part of the land, the people know that he's going to be there and they follow him. They follow on foot. So as he tries to get away, he still can't get away. So he goes to a deserted place in order to be alone, and the crowds follow him. So basically, this miracle that happens in Jesus' life for the 5,000, not counting women and children, is really the only miracle that Jesus does that is actually in all four of the Gospels. So you've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and this is the only miracle Jesus does that's actually in all four. So apparently, it's pretty significant. Even his birth wasn't in all four. It was only in two. So this is a big one. We're going to pay attention to this one this morning. So here's what happens. He tries to get away from the crowd, goes to a deserted place, not much around. The crowd comes, and he has compassion for them and heals their sick. Now, it's been a while, so the crowd is getting a little hangry. That's when you're so hungry, you're angry, you're hangry. And the disciples see this, and they say, all right, time to go. It's getting late. Jesus, send these people away so that they can go get their own food, and, they can probably not start a revolt, I'm sure. But Jesus doesn't say, okay, let's send them away. Jesus says, no, you feed them. So the disciples, they basically have on them what they would eat, right? A couple of loaves of bread, some fish. They just packed for themselves. And they're like, well, this isn't enough for everybody. And then Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to everyone, and everyone is fed. So we've got a little, in this story here, we've got a little of backstory, and we have a little foreshadowing. So the backstory is everybody's in a deserted place, all these thousands of people. It kind of sounds like the Israelites in the Old Testament that are in the desert wandering around, and they're hungry, and they come to God and they say, give us food, and then God provides for them. So that's a little bit of, what happens in the past. It's in our story. And then we have a bit of foreshadowing where Jesus takes the bread, breaks it, and blesses it. We've heard that before. It's kind of foreshadowing to the Lord's Supper, to the last meal that Jesus has with his disciples, in which we are all fed. So all of this happens, and there are leftovers. So miracle number one, there's a few miracles going on here. I think there's a few. Miracle number one is this compassion that Jesus has for the crowds. Now, Jesus being God, being Emmanuel, which is God with us, God among us, is a very interesting concept for the people of this day, mainly because it's not just Jews that have come to this moment. It's actually a lot of different religions and people coming from backgrounds. And in this society, it's a society that believed in multiple gods. You know, the Hellenistic gods, the gods that lived on the mountaintop, and then they would come down every so often and they would mess with people. They'd kind of, mess with people's lives. People were their playthings. But now you have this God that has come down from the one God and is actually compassionate and cares about others and heals them and feeds them. That, to many people, is a miracle, a compassionate God. So the other miracle, you could say, is God providing food for everyone? Maybe, but let's think about this. A God who can do everything, is feeding 5,000 people really that big of a miracle? I mean, that's kind of what God does, right? God provides these things. That's, it's kind of a miracle to us. But let's look at this another way. You have the miracle where people are fed, all these people, but also Jesus didn't necessarily do all of the feeding. What did he say to his disciples? When the disciples came to him, I'm sure they were a little afraid of the crowd. Jesus said, okay, well, don't send them away. You feed them. You give them something to eat. Jesus didn't say, okay, I got this, everybody. Just give me some bread. I'll just feed all these people with a miracle. No, he said, you give them the food. And he's doing this for the poor and the hungry while he is also grieving the loss of his cousin, caring for others even in his despair. So while I was doing some research this week, I ran across a few commentaries on this passage. One of them was from a pastor in Quincy, Massachusetts. His name is Stan Duncan. And he kind of shed a little light on the difference between the disciples' theology and Jesus' theology. So the disciples are coming out of a theology of scarcity. This whole idea that I packed enough food for myself, and that's all I have. So we need to just make those other people go away, and they can fend for themselves. They can get their own food, right? I've got enough for me. I can't be bothered to share this with everyone. However, the people of the time, at this time, the crowd was not going to be the people who could probably afford their own food. This wasn't the rich and the wealthy. This wasn't Herod and his group of people from the story before that were living in abundance and had a huge party and ate more than they could possibly imagine. These are the people that are coming to Jesus that need the healing, that need the food, that need the compassion. So sending them away isn't necessarily going to feed them, right? But the disciples, they see what they have and they don't think they have enough. So that is the gospel of scarcity. Now, Jesus is actually coming from a different gospel. He turns what people are thinking upside down, and he comes from this gospel of abundance. And that is that you share what you've got because ultimately it is God who gave that to you in the first place. That you are coming from an abundance of compassion, of food, of whatever you have. You always have more to give. And Jesus does not turn the crowds away so that they can fend for themselves. Jesus says, no, you're going to do it. You're going to feed these people. You do it. And one of the stories that Stan Duncan actually said in the commentary too was he was at a Bible camp when he was 15. So see, camp is a great thing, right? Camp is awesome. And at the end of the Bible study that one of the pastors was talking about this story in particular, at the end the question was asked that which was the greater miracle? For Jesus to radically change those few loaves into an abundance of loaves, or for Jesus to change the hearts of the people who were there and teach them how to share. What is the greater miracle? What is the greater miracle for us? For Jesus to do all the work? Or for Jesus to change our hearts and enable us to do it? Because we could rely on God to just feed everybody, but we know that is not how this works. We know that it is you and I who are the hands of Christ in the world, that we are the ones who do the feeding, and we are the ones who live in the abundance. And that doesn't necessarily mean giving all of the things that you have. It could mean giving the compassion. It could mean giving that listening ear to somebody who needs to just talk to you. There are lots of ways in which we live in this gospel of abundance. And it is not always what we want to do. Do you think obviously the disciples didn't want to share their food. Obviously, because they said, let's make all these people go, because we don't have enough for everyone. They were holding that close to them. They were holding what they had next to themselves instead of sharing it with others. And Jesus says, you can do it. This is part of discipleship. This is part of following Jesus, is living in this abundance. And we do that here. We definitely do that at Reformation. I am 100% not, this is not a conviction type sermon. Well, maybe it is actually. But it is one of those things where at some point in time, I don't know, Karen, you can help me out with this more, but at some point in time, somebody said, the people of this neighborhood, of this city need to be fed. So what did we do? We started a food pantry. And if you haven't packed a bag yet, you need to pack a bag. And if you haven't unloaded the truck, we're usually here at 7:30 in the morning once a month, unloading the truck. But this congregation is part of that. Somebody here said, we have so much, let's do more. We can do more. And every year at Super Bowl Sunday, we all get together and we have a huge raffle or auction for this food pantry, and we raise so much money. This congregation lives out its abundance. And if you haven't been to the auction yet, there's another one coming up this year. And even outside of that, people donate to the food pantry. It's actually this wonderful thing that happens throughout this congregation. But not just that. We have people that volunteer their time for the Playtime Project, which is a group of people that get together and play with homeless kids at a shelter once a week or twice a week. It is out of abundance. It is out of abundance that we share our ministry with our community and within our community. So I know I'm moving, and I'm really sad about that. I'm kind of excited, but I'm also very sad about it because I love you guys. And one of the ways in which I love you, and I'm so sad I'm not going to be here for it, is this anniversary campaign. And nobody told me to say this. I came up with this myself. But I'm not going to be here to live out this abundance that you all have. But I am inspired by it. It is so inspiring. We come and we go to all the council meetings, and we've sat through the architect meetings, and it has just been one of these things that is so amazing. And you know what? You want to know what one of my favorite parts about this anniversary campaign is? One of my absolute favorite parts is our tithe. Is that we are not only saying we live in abundance and we're here to fix our building, we're here to make it more welcoming so that the people of the neighborhood will come in, so that people will feel the love of God through our space. Because architecture usually wins, people. Space wins most of the time. And if your ceiling's falling down or if things are crumbling apart, you need a safe space in order to bring people in. And out of our abundance, not only are we saying we're going to raise all this money to fix our building and to add new things and to rework stuff, but we are going to tithe our money and give it away to Southeast Ministry, right? A few other, it's like we have so much goodness that we're going to share our goodness with others. That's how amazing this is. I'm literally so incredibly inspired by it, by you. Because I didn't do this. Pastor Mike didn't do it. This is a you-led thing. And if we all pitch in and get together behind it, it can be an amazing thing. We started out with this grand plan, right? We can't do all of it because we don't have $9 million or whatever it is, but we have to start somewhere. And it has been inspiring to hear your stories and to hear what concerns are. It has been amazing. And this is out of our abundance. Because not only are we having a food pantry, and not only do we have people volunteer with Playtime Project or help out the Lutheran Volunteer Corps, of all the things that you people do, we also said we want to make this place more welcome. We want this place to be a place of worship that people come to and feel safe. That people, if you want to serve at the table, that someday if you're in a wheelchair and you want to do that, you can do that up here. We want to be accessible for people, and we want to be welcoming, because discipleship is part of that. It's the feeding, it's the welcoming, it's the showing Christ to other people. And we are all part of it, because you can do it, but you cannot do it alone. It's not one person that's going to rebuild this place. It's not one person that feeds everyone. It's not one person that unloads that food pantry truck. Let me tell you, it's not one person. It's you and you and you and everyone in this room and outside of this room. Because we all can work together. And we all work together, we can feed 5,000, 10,000. When we all work together, we can raise money for the food pantry. We can raise money for refugee resettlement. We can volunteer for organizations. We can do all of this. And we do all of it because of the grace of God. And because Christ has told us we can do it. To take our theology of scarcity and turn it into a theology of abundance. Amen.